The Earth was still young, still glowing, still restless. Its surface was a furnace of fire, its crust cracked and fragile, its mantle boiling with heat. Volcanoes erupted endlessly, their plumes filling the sky with ash and gas. Lava seas spread for thousands of miles, glowing like embers beneath a storm of darkness. But something new was beginning. The Earth, though still molten, was cooling. For millions of years, Earth had known only fire. Its surface was a restless plain of magma, broken by endless impacts, scarred by collisions, drowned in lava. Nights glowed brighter than days, the skies thick with ash and lightning. It was a world of destruction, a world of molten scars, a world of becoming. But now, beneath the chaos, a change stirred. The furnace was losing its edge. The fire was dimming, if only slightly. The Earth was breathing, and its breath was cooling. Volcanoes erupted everywhere, their fountains rising like pillars of fire. They breathed out more than flame: carbon dioxide, nitrogen, sulfur, and above all, steam. The planet exhaled with every eruption, filling its skies with vapor. This vapor lingered. It circled the world in heavy clouds, dense and thick, glowing faintly with the fire below. The air became heavier, wetter, more crowded with the breath of the planet. It was the beginning of an atmosphere that could hold water. The skies, once thin and fragile, were thick now with clouds of steam. They circled endlessly, swirling in storms, heavy with vapor. Lightning flickered in their depths, thunder rolled across the molten plains. The Earth was cloaked in storms, wrapped in its own breath. The fire below glowed red through the clouds, but the clouds themselves grew darker, heavier, more filled with the promise of rain. It was not yet water, but it was the hint of water, the memory of what was coming. Cooling is not sudden, it is not quick, it is slow, patient, inevitable. The Earth's furnace still raged, but it raged less brightly. The mantle still boiled, but its heat ebbed. The crust still cracked, but it hardened more quickly. The oceans of lava still spread, but they cooled at their edges, forming sheets of rock that endured for days, sometimes weeks. The planet was restless still, but less so. It was beginning to breathe more slowly, beginning to exhale more gently. Cooling was patient, but it was unbroken. At night, the world glowed still, its lava seas shimmering beneath the clouds. But now, the skies added their own beauty. Clouds of steam reflected the red glow, turning entire horizons crimson. Lightning split the heavens, illuminating the stormy sky in flashes of silver. It was a night filled not only with fire, but with clouds. A night that spoke not only of fury, but of patience. A night that promised something new. The Earth's nights were no longer only fires. They were fire and vapor. The atmosphere grew heavier with each eruption. Steam thickened, clouds gathered, storms circled. The weight of the skies pressed upon the molten plains, a blanket of vapor trapping the heat below, but also holding the promise of rain above. The Earth was wrapped now, no longer naked to the void. Its cloak was heavy, storm-filled, and unbroken. It was a cloak that would one day deliver water. But for now, it was only vapor, only storm, only the breath of cooling. And then, for the first time, raindrops began to fall. There were not many, they did not last. They fell from the heavy clouds, struck the molten surface, and vanished into steam with a hiss. The ground was too hot, the seas too molten, the air too heavy, the rain could not endure. But it had fallen, the skies had released their gift, if only for moments. The Earth had felt the touch of water. It was not yet oceans, not yet rivers, not yet lakes. It was only hints, only whispers, only drops, but it was the beginning. Every cycle of eruption, every plume of vapor, every cloud that circled brought the same promise. Rain would fall again, rain would fall longer, rain would linger. The Earth's cooling breath was not only patience, it was persistence. It was a promise written in steam and storm, in cloud and thunder. The oceans were not yet here, but they were coming. So Earth breathed, and its breath cooled. Fire still raged, lava still flowed, storms still thundered, but the skies were heavy now, and their weight was water. The Earth was not yet a world of oceans, but it was no longer only a world of fire. It was becoming both fire and water, storm and breath, lava and cloud. It was becoming the world that would one day shimmer in blue. And so part I closes with the earth still molten, still restless, but exhaling clouds of steam, wrapping itself in storms and whispering the first promise of water. The next chapter will bring the sky of endless clouds, when storms circled without pause, and rain began its long, patient struggle to endure. The earth was still glowing, still restless, still breathing fire from its molten heart. Volcanoes erupted without ceasing, lava seas shimmered across the land, and impacts scarred the surface anew. But above all this, something was changing. The skies had grown heavy. They were no longer thin veils of vapor and ash. They had become thick, endless, unbroken. The earth was now a world of clouds. Every volcano fed the sky. Steam poured upward in plumes, joining the thickening shroud. Carbon dioxide and nitrogen swirled together, trapping heat, building weight. Ash from impacts drifted into the air, only to be swallowed by the storms. The planet exhaled endlessly, and its breath never left. It lingered, circled, gathered, until the whole world was wrapped in vapor. The Earth's atmosphere was no longer just the echo of eruptions. It was a cloak of clouds, a living skin around the molten world. Look up from the surface of that young Earth, and you would not see stars. You would not see the sun. You would see only clouds, endless, unbroken, storm-filled clouds. They circled the planet like rivers in the sky, their currents constant, their storms eternal. Lightning flickered in their depths, thunder rolled without pause. The horizon was a wall of vapor, the heavens a ceiling of storms. The earth was sealed within itself, hidden beneath its own sky. The storms were never quiet. They howled with winds that circled the planet. They roared with thunder that shook the air. They flashed with lightning that split the heavens in silver arcs. Rain fell constantly, torrents of water pouring from the clouds, but the surface was still too hot. Each drop hissed into steam, each river vanished before it could flow. The storms gave endlessly, but the earth was not yet ready to receive. Water rose as vapor from the molten seas, gathered in the skies, fell as rain, and returned as steam. The cycle repeated endlessly, day after day, storm after storm. It was a cycle without pause, a rhythm without rest. The earth exhaled, the skies condensed, the rains fell, the ground rejected them. And yet persistence has its power. The storms endured, and endurance always wins. The nights were darker than ever, but not with silence. Clouds hid the stars, storms drowned the horizon, thunder rolled endlessly. The only light was the glow of lava, reflecting upward into the stormy veil. The earth glowed red beneath a ceiling of black, its molten plains mirrored in the restless skies. It was a world without stars, a world without night, a world sealed beneath endless storms. Clouds are patient. They linger, they circle, they build. Even as the earth's heat boiled away the rains, the clouds returned. They thickened, they darkened, they grew heavier. Each drop of rain lost was replaced by another. Each cycle of steam fed the storms again. The clouds never left. Their patience was as endless as their storms. Imagine standing on a volcanic plain then, lava glowing beneath your feet, the air heavy with ash and vapor. The rain falls in torrents, drenching the ground, streaming into rivers, only to vanish in seconds, boiling upward in great columns of steam. The hiss is constant, a song of futility, a chorus of water trying and failing to stay. But failure was only the beginning. Each attempt brought the Earth closer to success. Through this endless storming, the Earth's atmosphere grew stronger. Gases thickened, clouds deepened, vapor lingered. The planet now wore a cloak dense enough to trap its heat, thick enough to carry its storms, strong enough to hold its future oceans. The Earth was no longer only a world of fire. It was a world of fire and cloud. And in that balance, water would one day find its home. So the Earth turned beneath its storms, day after day, age after age, wrapped in clouds, hidden from the stars, drenched in rains that could not yet stay. It was a planet of fire below and vapor above, a furnace wrapped in storms. The Earth had not yet become a world of oceans, but in its endless clouds, in its patient rains, in its unbroken storms, the promise of oceans was already written. And so part II closes with Earth cloaked in endless clouds, storming without pause, waiting for the moment when rain would linger and oceans would shimmer into permanence. The next chapter will bring the first raindrops that cling, hiss, and vanish, the first fragile attempts of water to stay. The Earth was wrapped in storms, cloaked in vapor, its skis heavy with clouds that never parted. For ages, they circled endlessly, thundering, flashing, pouring themselves downward in vain. Every drop vanished, every river boiled away, every storm dissolved into steam. But even in futility, water persisted, and in that persistence, something beautiful happened. The first raindrops truly fell. The skis could hold no more. Steam rose in endless columns from the lava seas, feeding the storms again and again. The clouds grew heavier, darker, thicker, until at last they broke. Rain poured down in torrents. Not mist, not vapor, but drops, billions upon billions of them, falling together, covering the molten plains, filling the air with the hiss of water meeting fire. The Earth was struck not by meteors, not by stones, not by fire. It was struck by rain. For the first time, the planet knew the sound of rainfall. It was not the gentle patter of modern storms, nor the soothing rhythm of drizzle on leaves. It was a roar, a violent, endless hiss as rain met molten stone. Each drop was a battle. Each drop was a moment of defiance. The air filled with steam so thick it rose in columns, glowing faintly red in the light of lava. The rain was not victorious, but it was unbroken. The sound of falling water became the soundtrack of Earth's cooling. Everywhere the rain fell, it vanished. It struck the ground with a hiss, boiled upward in clouds, and returned to the sky. Puddles formed only to disappear in seconds. Rivers carved across the lava plains only to dissolve into vapor. The Earth rejected the rain, too hot to hold it, too restless to keep it. But the water did not stop. It fell again and again and again. Persistence was its strength. Water is patient. It does not give up. Even when each drop vanished, more followed. Even when rivers dissolved, storms returned. Even when the Earth hissed them away, the skis sent them again. And in that patience, water was winning. Not today, not tomorrow, but inevitably. The planet was cooling, if only slowly. The lava seas were shrinking, if only slightly. The crust was hardening in places, if only briefly. Each raindrop was a step forward, each storm a victory of patience. At night, the rains fell under lightning's glow. Each bolt lit the torrents in silver flashes, turning the skis into rivers of light. The lava plains reflected the glow, red and silver mingling in restless beauty. It was not yet peaceful. The storms howled, the rain vanished, the lava glowed. But it was beautiful, the first nights when water and fire danced together across the surface of a young world. The Earth was no longer only fire, it was becoming a world of storms. The cycle never ceased. Steam rose from lava, gathered in clouds, fell as rain, vanished as vapor, and rose again. Each cycle built upon the last, thickening the skis, cooling the crust, deepening the patience of water. The Earth could not stop it. Fire resisted, but fire was finite. Water persisted, and persistence is infinite. The first raindrops were the beginning of inevitability. Sometimes, where the crust hardened briefly, water lingered. Small puddles formed, shallow and fragile, steaming in the glow of lava. They lasted only minutes, sometimes hours, before vanishing, but they had existed. These puddles were the first gathering places, the first hints of oceans. Small, fragile, fleeting, but real. The Earth was learning to hold water. Every raindrop that fell carried a whisper. Together, they spoke of what was coming: oceans, rivers, lakes, seas. The Earth could not yet hear, but the promise was written in every storm. One day the rains would linger. One day the puddles would grow. One day the oceans would shimmer in blue. But even now, the first whispers were there, carried in every drop, spoken in every hiss. So the rains fell, and though they vanished, they persisted. The earth was still too hot, still too restless, still too fiery. But water had touched it, again and again, refusing to leave, refusing to surrender. It was not yet a world of oceans, but it was no longer only a world of fire. It was a world of rain. And so part III closes with the first raindrops hissing against molten stone, fragile but persistent, fleeting but inevitable. The next chapter will bring rivers of steam, when the rains poured so heavily that steam became a river of its own, rising upward in endless columns to feed the cycle again. The rains had begun. The first fragile drops had hissed against molten stone, the first shallow puddles had lingered before vanishing. But the skis were not finished. Their burden was heavy, their storms unbroken, their patience unending. Now the rains grew heavier. They did not fall in whispers, nor in fragile showers, but in torrents. Sheets of water poured from the clouds, striking the planet in floods so immense that the earth seemed to steam as much as it rained. The world had become a furnace breathing rivers of vapor. The clouds no longer released themselves gently. They opened in sheets, emptying oceans of vapor downward all at once. Drops merged into streams, streams into floods, floods into torrents. The surface of Earth vanished beneath curtains of rain, falling without pause, without mercy, without end. For hours, for days, for weeks, the storms raged. The entire planet was drenched, its lava plains struck by more water than they could reject at once. But the Earth was still too hot. The rain could not endure. Everywhere the water fell, steam rose. Columns of vapor shot skyward, glowing faintly in the red light of molten seas. They twisted into the storms, feeding them, thickening the clouds, building the weight of the skis. It was as if the planet itself were exhaling. The rains fell, and the earth answered with steam, roaring upward in rivers as vast as the torrents that fell. The world had become a cycle of water, falling, hissing, vanishing, returning. The sound was constant, a deafening chorus of hiss and roar. Rain struck lava with explosive force, boiling in an instant. Entire lakes of water turned to vapor before they could even form. Rivers poured into valleys only to vanish in seconds. The Earth's furnace resisted, but the skis persisted. Fire hissed against water, water roared against fire, and neither gave way. It was a battle fought in sound as much as sight, a world alive with the hiss of transformation. At night, the rains fell silver under the flash of lightning. Steam rose in pillars, glowing with the light of lava below, shimmering in the storm's illumination. The skis were filled with ghostly rivers, white and translucent, dancing upward into the blackness. The stars were hidden, the sun unseen. The Earth's nights were filled not with silence, but with rivers of steam glowing faintly against the stormy veil. It was a beauty both fierce and fragile, violent and patient. The earth seemed to breathe in rhythm with the storms. The rains fell, the ground exhaled steam. The rains fell again, the steam returned. With every storm, with every torrent, the cycle deepened. The planet was learning to breathe with water as much as with fire. Its skis thickened, its surface cooled, its crust hardened more each cycle. The earth was not only resisting, it was changing. The rivers of steam were not futile, they made progress. No matter how much the earth rejected, the water returned. Clouds gathered, rains poured, steam rose, clouds gathered again. The persistence of water was endless. And little by little, the earth yielded. The surface, once molten everywhere, cooled at its edges. Lava plains hardened into black basalt. Valleys lingered longer before flooding with magma again. Puddles survived minutes, sometimes hours. The water was winning, not with force, but with patience. In places where the crust thickened, basins formed. The rains filled them briefly, water shimmering in stormlight before boiling away. These were not yet lakes, not yet seas, but they were beginnings. For the first time, Earth held water not just in the sky, but on its surface, if only for moments. It was a fragile step, but a step nonetheless. Every storm carried the same promise. Every torrent, every flood, every river of steam spoke of what would one day come. Oceans vast enough to stay, waters deep enough to endure, seas wide enough to cover the world in blue. The earth could not yet hold them, but the skies promised them again and again, with every fall of rain, with every rise of steam. The oceans were written into the storm. So the rains poured, the steam rose, the storms circled. The earth was not yet ready for oceans, but it was no longer a world of fire alone. It was a world of water as well, water patient, water persistent, water unbroken. The rivers of steam were not the end of rain, they were the beginning of oceans. And so part IV closes with Earth breathing in rhythm with its storms, rain falling, steam rising, the cycle repeating endlessly, each time bringing the planet closer to becoming a world of oceans. The next chapter will bring the endless storms, when lightning, thunder, and torrential rain circled the Earth without pause, shaping the surface through sheer persistence. The rains had begun their struggle, falling in torrents, boiling into steam, returning to the skies. The planet breathed in rhythm with its storms, exhaling vapor as quickly as the clouds poured it down. But now the skies grew wilder still. Lightning cracked without pause, thunder rolled endlessly, torrents poured unbroken. The Earth had become a world not only of fire and rain, but of storms, storms that circled without end, storms that defined its every breath. The Earth was a furnace beneath, but above, it was a storm. Look upward then, and the heavens were alive. Clouds towered in colossal pillars, stretching miles into the sky, black and heavy with water. Lightning arced within them, sometimes a single bolt, sometimes entire webs of silver tearing across the firmament. Thunder shook the air in waves, so constant that silence no longer existed. The ground trembled not only with impacts and eruptions, but with the rolling voice of the skies. It was a planet wrapped in fury, a place where the heavens roared as loudly as the earth itself. Rain poured in sheets so heavy that horizons vanished. Lava plains disappeared beneath curtains of water, impacts were hidden by downpours, volcanoes erupted unseen beneath the flood. The torrents did not fall for hours, nor for days, but for years, for centuries, for millennia. The cycle of storms was unbroken. The earth lived beneath waterfalls from the sky. And though the rains still boiled away, they fell with such persistence that cooling deepened, basins lasted longer, puddles grew wider. The earth was not yet an ocean world, but it was becoming one. The ground was no longer a passive stage. Lava hissed and cracked beneath the torrents, steam rose in rivers, volcanoes erupted through floods. Lightning struck molten lakes, splitting them in blinding flashes. The storms and the fire were not separate forces. They danced together, fury meeting fury, shaping the surface with every clash. It was a world alive with dueling elements, fire and water, thunder and lava, storm and stone. The storms never parted, not for a night, not for a day. The sun was hidden, the stars invisible, the moon not yet born. The earth lived in twilight, lit only by lightning above and lava below. At night, the skies flashed constantly, each bolt illuminating torrents of silver rain, each strike mirrored in molten plains. The storms made night indistinguishable from day. The world did not know darkness, it knew only stormlight. Through this endless cycle, water gained ground. The crust cooled more quickly beneath floods, the air thickened with vapor that lingered, and the atmosphere grew more stable. The rains no longer vanished in seconds. Pools lingered longer, basins steamed more slowly, lakes formed and endured for days, even weeks. The storms were carving permanence into the planet, drop by drop, flood by flood. Water was not winning by force, it was winning by persistence. Imagine standing on that world then. Above, clouds tower so high they hide the heavens. Lightning strikes every minute, thunder roars so constantly that the air never falls silent. Rains pound the surface in floods, so heavy they blur the horizon. Around you, steam rises in columns, glowing faintly in red from lava below. Rivers form only to vanish, puddles hiss into vapor, and yet the rains continue without pause. The roar of the skis was endless, and Earth was its stage. Even as rain vanished into steam, it left its mark. Torrents carved channels across the lava plains, grooves that hardened when the crust cooled. Floods scoured valleys into the surface, even if they lasted only days before filling with magma again. The storms were sculptors. They carved a young planet not by permanence, but by repetition. Every drop left a trace, every flood a scar. The surface was learning the shape of water. Centuries of storms blurred into millennia. Lava cooled more quickly, crust grew thicker, puddles lingered longer. The Earth's furnace still burned, but its edges softened. Its surface still glowed, but more faintly. Time was working with the storms. Together, they cooled the planet into something new, something capable of holding oceans. The endless storms were not chaos, they made progress. So the Earth turned beneath its cloak of clouds, drenched without pause, thundered without silence, struck by lightning without rest. It was not yet a world of seas, but it was no longer a world of fire alone. It was a storm world, patient, persistent, enduring. The oceans were not yet here, but they were coming, carried in every drop, promised in every storm, written in every hiss of rain against stone. And so Part V closes with Earth still wrapped in fury, but shifting steadily toward oceans through patience and persistence. The next chapter will bring the gathering pools. When water lingers longer, puddles become basins, and the first fragile hints of seas appear. The storms had raged for millennia. Rain poured endlessly, torrents fell without pause, thunder rolled like the heartbeat of the skis. For ages, every drop that fell had vanished into steam, every river dissolved before it could flow, every flood consumed by the furnace below. But now something subtle was changing. The Earth was cooling. The lava plains were hardening into sheets of basalt, the crust thickening, the surface stabilizing. And into these hollows, these valleys, these new scars, the rains began to gather. The Earth was learning to hold water. Where once puddles lasted only seconds, they now lingered for minutes, sometimes hours. Steam still rose from their surfaces, but not as furiously. Drops fell into basins of cooling stone and did not vanish instantly. These puddles were shallow, fragile, fleeting, but they were real. For the first time in its history, Earth held water on its skin. The puddles shimmered in stormlight, silver against the red glow of lava plains. They were not yet seas, not yet rivers, not yet lakes, but they were beginnings. Impacts had scarred the surface with craters, and lava flows had left valleys in their wake. These hollows became the first basins, fragile bowls into which the rains could gather. The storms poured endlessly, filling them, spilling them, carving channels across the crust. For hours, for days, the pools shimmered. Then heat reclaimed them, boiling them into steam once more. But the basins remained, waiting for the next storm, and the next, and the next. The Earth had begun to collect water. Imagine standing near one of these pools then. Around you, the crust still glows red with heat, lava cracks and flows nearby, volcanoes roar in the distance. But at your feet, there is water shimmering silver, steaming upward in ghostly threads, glowing faintly in the light of fire. The air is heavy with vapor, the ground trembling with thunder, but the pool holds, briefly, defiantly, beautifully. It is the first reflection of the skis, the first mirror of clouds. The pools did not last. They boiled away, they evaporated, they returned to the sky. But each time they lingered longer, each time the crust cooled further, each time the patience of water deepened its hold. Water was not discouraged. It fell again, filled again, lingered again. Patience has always been its strength, and patience was carving permanence into the earth. At night, these pools shimmered beneath the storms. Lightning lit their surfaces in silver flashes, reflecting the skis above, glowing against the black basalt around them. Steam rose in ghostly columns, twisting into the storm clouds overhead. The stars were still hidden, the sun unseen, but in these pools, the heavens found their first mirrors. The skis saw themselves upon the earth, if only for moments. It was a fragile beauty, but one that promised more. The contrast was everywhere. Lava flows glowed nearby, rivers of fire feeding the surface, while pools of water shimmered in hollows. Steam rose where they met, hissing as water touched molten stone. It was a planet of opposites now, fire and water, stone and vapor, storm and silence. The pools were fragile, but they were signs of balance, signs that Earth was no longer only a furnace, no longer only a storm. It was becoming something in between. As pools gathered and vanished, they left their mark. Water carved channels into the crust, shallow valleys and grooves that hardened as basalt cooled. These scars became the first hints of rivers, paths that water would one day claim more fully. The storms were sculpting not only the skies but the land. The Earth's face was being carved by water, however briefly, however softly. Even vanishing left a memory. In every pool, in every basin, in every shimmering surface, there was a whisper. Oceans are coming, seas will gather, rivers will flow. The Earth could not yet hold them. Its heat still resisted, its surface still boiled. But the pools spoke of a future written in every raindrop, a future when water would not vanish, but stay. The seas were already present in promise, if not yet in permanence. So the rains poured, the basins filled, the pools shimmered and vanished. The Earth was still too hot, still too restless, still too fiery, but water had begun to gather, water had begun to hold. The Earth was not yet a world of oceans, but it was no longer a world without water. It was a world of pools. And so part VI closes with Earth cradling its first fragile puddles and basins, shimmering under stormlight, whispering the inevitability of seas to come. The next chapter will bring the shimmer of oceans, when those fragile pools begin to merge, and the first true seas stretch across the planet's surface. For ages the rains had fallen and vanished, the puddles had lingered only briefly, the pools had shimmered and boiled away. But the Earth was cooling, little by little, storm by storm, flood by flood. Its crust thickened, its valleys deepened, its basins grew larger. And at last, water found places where it could stay. The first oceans shimmered beneath storm-filled skies. The puddles had become pools, the pools had become basins, and now those basins began to merge. Torrents poured into valleys, floods gathered in craters, channels carved by storms fed the hollows. For the first time, water spread beyond a moment. It lingered for days, for months, for years. It did not vanish at once. The Earth was no longer covered only in fire. Vast sheets of water began to cover it too. Under the storm clouds, the new oceans glowed. Lightning flashed across their surfaces, turning them silver. Lava plains reflected in them, glowing red beneath stormlight. They shimmered in the twilight, mirrors of the heavens above, mirrors of the furnace below. It was not yet the calm blue of modern seas. It was a restless shimmer, a storm-tossed glow, a silver fire across water's skin, but it was the ocean. The Earth's surface had begun to shine. The furnace was not gone. Volcanoes still erupted, lava still spread, molten plains still glowed. Steam rose where fire touched water, vast columns billowing into the skies. The Earth was half ocean, half fire, seas steaming under storms, lava glowing beside waves. It was a world of contrast, fire and water coexisting for the first time. And in that coexistence, balance was forming. At night, the oceans reflected the storms above. Lightning flashed across their surfaces, turning them into rivers of silver fire. Thunder rolled across waves, and winds whipped them into restless motion. The seas did not rest, but they endured. Where once water had vanished in seconds, now it lingered through the long nights, shimmering in stormlight. The Earth's nights had found a new voice, the voice of waves. Every storm added more. Every drop that lingered deepened the seas, widened the basins, and expanded the reach of water. The Earth was cooling still, but cooling faster now, aided by the very oceans that gathered upon it. Water was patient, and patience builds depth. The first seas were shallow, storm-tossed, steaming, but they grew deeper, wider, stronger. Their shimmer carried promise. One day they would calm, one day they would cover continents, one day they would cradle life. But for now, they shimmered in the stormlight. The oceans were not passive. They shaped the land as they gathered. Torrents carved channels, floods deepened valleys, waves scoured the crust. Even as lava remade the surface, water reshaped it again. Fire built, water carved. Fire erupted, water endured. Fire created, water persisted. Together, they wrote the first true landscapes of Earth. In time, basins grew large enough to cradle seas that did not vanish at once. They shimmered for centuries, filling valleys, covering plains, enduring beneath storms. These were not yet the global oceans that would one day cloak the world in blue, but they were seas nonetheless, vast, silver, shimmering under lightning's glow. The Earth had at last become a planet of seas. Though the seas shimmered silver in stormlight, though steam still rose from their surfaces, though fire still glowed beside them, they carried within them a promise. One day, when storms eased and skies cleared, they would turn blue. The blue of life, the blue of calm, the blue of permanence. The Earth was not yet a blue planet, but it was no longer only red and black, it was silver too. So the rains poured, the seas shimmered, the storms raged, the lava glowed. The Earth was no longer only fire, no longer only storm, no longer only vapor. It was water as well. The oceans had come. They were shallow, they were restless, they were storm-tossed and steaming, but they were oceans. The Earth was becoming a world of water. And so part VII closes with Earth shimmering under storm-filled skies, its first seas restless but real, its promise of blue already written upon the surface. The next chapter will bring the breath of comets, when icy visitors from the far reaches of the solar system delivered more water and enriched the oceans with new gifts. The oceans had shimmered into being, silver beneath storm-filled skies, steaming and restless upon a still fiery crust. Water had found its foothold, carving valleys, filling basins, spreading into seas, but Earth was not yet finished with its inheritance. From the darkness beyond, from the frozen edges of the solar system, new gifts were on their way. They were comets, wanderers of ice and dust, born in the cold, shaped in silence, traveling for eons through the void. And now they fell toward Earth. Comets had always circled the sun, drifting in distant orbits far beyond the warmth of the inner system. But Jupiter's gravity had stirred them, scattering them inward, sending them on paths that crossed the young Earth. They came from the silence of the void, glowing faintly with vapor as they neared the sun, trailing long, ghostly tails across the heavens. To Earth they were messengers of ice, of dust, of molecules that had drifted for billions of years. When they struck with fury. Comets did not fall gently. They arrived at speeds faster than lightning, faster than storms, faster than sound. The impact shook the crust, boiled seas, and lit the skies with fire. And yet, with their violence, they brought gifts. Ice melted into water, dust mingled with oceans, complex molecules scattered across the planet's surface. The seas grew deeper, the chemistry of life grew richer. Each comet impact was a paradox, destruction and creation in one breath. Oceans boiled where they struck, craters spread across the crust, shockwaves rippled through the mantle. And yet, with every strike, water deepened, ingredients multiplied, potential expanded. The Earth was being scarred, but it was also being seeded. It was a dance of fire and ice, violence and gift, storm and silence. At night, the skies blazed with comets. Some passed close, trailing luminous tails across the heavens, glowing green and white as their ices vaporized. Others fell, their descent a streak of fire that ended in impact, the ground trembling with their arrival. The storms above mingled with fireballs from the void, lightning flashing beside comet trails, thunder rolling with impacts. The nights were alive with falling stars, and the Earth was their cradle. The comets brought more than water. They carried carbon, nitrogen, and other elements forged in ancient stars. Some even carried simple organic molecules, building blocks of life that had drifted through space, since before Earth was born. When they mingled with oceans, they enriched them. Seas were no longer only water and stone, they became cauldrons of chemistry, simmering with potential. The breath of comets was not only water, it was a promise. Each impact was a roar shaking the planet to its core. The seas hissed and boiled, the skies filled with steam, the ground cracked and scarred. But Earth endured. The oceans returned, the storms circled, the scars filled again. Destruction was real, but it was not final. The gifts remained long after the fire faded. The Earth grew deeper in water, richer in chemistry, stronger in promise. With every comet, the seas spread wider. Basins filled more fully, valleys drowned, plains vanished beneath restless waters. The shimmer of oceans became broader, steadier, more permanent. The seas were no longer fragile, they were enduring. The Earth had become a planet not only of storms, not only of fire, but of oceans vast enough to hold the gifts of the void. These gifts had traveled for billions of years, from the frozen edges of the solar system to the furnace of Earth. Their journey was patient, their timing perfect. The cosmos had written water into Earth's story twice, once in its own breath, once in the comets that fell. Both were necessary, both were part of the design, both shaped the destiny of the planet. The Earth was now a world of oceans, carried on the patience of the cosmos. So the comets came, and though they scarred the surface, they enriched the seas. They fell as fire, but left as water. They struck as violence, but lingered as promises. The Earth was no longer only storms and lava, no longer only vapor and pools. It was oceans, growing deeper, richer, more alive with possibility. The breath of comets had made it so. And so part VIII closes with Earth's oceans shimmering wider and deeper, enriched by the icy gifts of distant wanderers. The next chapter will bring the patience of water, when seas, storms, and rivers persist for millennia, shaping the crust and carving permanence into the planet. The comets had fallen, the rains had lingered, the oceans had spread. Fire still glowed, volcanoes still roared, lightning still cracked, but water had found permanence. Now began a quieter, slower chapter. The seas no longer only shimmered beneath storms, they began to shape the world. Water flowed, carved, lingered, and returned, always present, always patient. The Earth had discovered the endurance of water. Water moved constantly. Rain fell from the skies, streams trickled across valleys, rivers poured into basins, oceans stretched across plains. Steam still rose, storms still circled, but water remained. It did not retreat entirely to the heavens. It clung to the land, filled the craters, and spread into the seas. The surface of Earth was no longer only molten fire, but restless water. And though the fire resisted, the water persisted. Every stream carved its mark. Every flood etched a channel into the crust. Even shallow rivers cut grooves that hardened as stone cooled. Basalt cracked under torrents, valleys deepened with every storm. The Earth was being sculpted, not by fire this time, but by water. Slowly, softly, patiently. Fire reshaped quickly, violently, furiously. Water reshaped slowly, silently, endlessly. Both left scars, but water's scars lasted longer. Volcanoes still erupted, lava still spread, molten plains still steamed. But water adapted. It carved channels through cooled basalt, pooled in basins spared from fire, and endured around volcanoes. The fire burned bright but brief. Water returned again and again. Fire scarred the land, but water carved it deeper. Together, they balanced the young Earth, fire renewing, water persisting. At night, the storms still circled, lightning still flashed, thunder still roared. But between flashes, the sound of flowing water could be heard. Rivers moved across the land, oceans lapped against new shores, rain pattered on basins that did not vanish at once. The Earth's nights were no longer only fire and storm. They were waves and rivers too. The patience of water had given the planet a new voice. The seas grew deeper with every cycle of rain, every flood, every comet. They did not vanish in centuries nor in millennia. They stayed, shimmering under storms, enduring under the sun's faint light. Water was now permanent, not fleeting. Oceans had come to stay. And with their staying, Earth was transformed. It was no longer only a furnace, no longer only a storm world. It was a planet of seas. Where once lava plains had stretched unbroken, water carved them. Where once craters lay silent, water filled them. Where once mountains rose sharp, water smoothed them. The surface of Earth was becoming softer, more rounded, more shaped by patience than violence. Fire destroyed, water shaped. Fire ended, water endured. The Earth was learning the gentleness of change. Each drop of rain carried memory. Each wave held history. Together, they wrote stories into the land, valleys deepening, plains eroding, shores shifting. The Earth was young still, but already it bore the marks of water's persistence. Even in a world of fire, water had found permanence. And in time, those marks would become the landscapes of the future. The seas spread across the planet, covering lowlands, filling basins, stretching into restless horizons. Storms raged above them, winds whipped them, lightning illuminated them, but they endured. The Earth's identity had changed. It was no longer only fire and stone, it was water as well, a world of oceans, patient, persistent, enduring. The Earth was learning to hold what would define it forever. So the rains poured, the rivers carved, the oceans spread. The storms raged still, but water was no longer fleeting. It was permanent now, etched into the land, written into the planet, woven into its story. The patience of water had transformed the Earth. It was no longer only a planet of fire, it was a planet of seas. And so Part IX closes with Earth reshaped by persistence, its valleys carved, its basins filled, its surface softened by the slow, enduring hand of water. The next chapter will bring the first seas of blue, when storms ease enough that oceans shimmer in calm, reflecting light not only as silver, but as the first true blue. The rains had fallen without pause. The storms had raged for millennia. The oceans had spread, deepened, carved, and endured. Water had found permanence, patient and unbroken, reshaping the young Earth. And now, for the first time, the planet revealed its color. The first seas of blue shimmered beneath the stormy skies. Until now, the oceans had glowed silver, reflecting lightning, stormlight, and lava's red glow. They shimmered as mirrors, restless and bright, but never calm. But as the storms grew less furious, as pauses lingered between thunder, as the atmosphere thickened into balance, the waters began to change. In those rare quiet moments, the seas reflected not only fire and storm, but their own depth. They glowed not silver, but blue. It was the birth of a color that would define the planet forever. The oceans had grown vast. Basins deepened into seas, valleys drowned into bays, plains vanished beneath waves. From horizon to horizon, water stretched, restless but enduring, shimmering beneath clouds. From space, Earth no longer glowed only red with fire. It shimmered with oceans, vast and unmistakable. The young planet had become a world of seas. It was the beginning of the blue planet. Volcanoes still roared, lava still glowed, islands of fire still rose within the oceans. Steam billowed where molten rock met waves, columns rising high into the skies. But fire was no longer the master. Fire raged, but water endured. Fire created, but water surrounded. Fire scarred, but water healed. The balance had shifted. The Earth was no longer a furnace that resisted water. It was an ocean world that contained fire. At night, the seas shimmered beneath storms, lit by flashes of lightning. Their surfaces no longer reflected only silver. They glowed faintly blue in stormlight, deep and quiet beneath the chaos above. The skies roared, the thunder rolled, the lightning struck. But beneath it all, the oceans endured, calm at their depths, unbroken in their color. The Earth's nights were no longer only fire and storm. They were seas as well, glowing in their first blue. Blue is the color of depth. It is the color of water holding light, bending it, softening it. As the oceans grew deeper, they found this color. For the first time, Earth's surface reflected not only the violence of storms, but the gentleness of depth. The seas were no longer only mirrors of fire and clouds, they were mirrors of themselves, mirrors of their endurance. The Earth had found its color. Between storms, the seas calmed, winds softened, thunder hushed, lightning paused. In those moments, the surface of the oceans grew still. Clouds parted faintly, letting sunlight touch the waves. And under that light, the seas revealed their truest shade, a deep, calm blue. It was fleeting, fragile, but real. The storms would return, the seas would rage again, but in every pause, the Earth revealed its new identity. Stand on that world then, and you would see horizons no longer of molten fire, no longer of steaming silver, but of water stretching vast and blue. Waves moved under stormy skies, clouds reflected in endless oceans. It was still a world of chaos, but also a world of beauty. The horizons promised not only storms, but seas, not only fire, but balance, not only struggle, but endurance. The seas were more than water. They were identical. They gave Earth its reflection, its color, its permanence. They calmed the furnace, softened the surface, and balanced the storms. The Earth was no longer only molten stone and endless clouds. It was oceans, shimmering blue, enduring beneath the fury. It was a planet becoming itself. So the rains fell, the storms raged, the oceans shimmered, and in their depths, the first true blue appeared. It was the color of patience, the color of permanence, the color of Earth's future. It was the beginning of the blue planet, the world of oceans, the home of life yet to come. The Earth had found its truest reflection. And so Part X closes with Earth shimmering in its first seas of blue, no longer only fire, no longer only storm, but oceans vast enough to give the planet its identity. The next chapter will bring the quiet between storms, when oceans linger calm for longer, and the planet begins to know the rhythm of balance. For ages, the Earth had known only fury. Clouds circled without pause, lightning split the heavens in endless flashes, thunder roared across oceans that never knew calm. Rain fell constantly, winds whipped ceaselessly, storms owned the skies. But now something new was happening. The storms, though still mighty, began to rest. Not for long, not for always, but long enough for silence to grow, long enough for calm to linger. The Earth had discovered the quiet between storms. The atmosphere had thickened, balanced, and stabilized. Volcanic breath still poured upward, comets still fell, rain still circled, but the skies no longer boiled with such relentless fury. Clouds parted more often, winds calmed more frequently, lightning paused between its flashes. For the first time, the Earth's storms had rhythm, not only chaos. The skies softened, and the seas reflected their peace. Through breaks in the clouds, sunlight reached the surface. Not the dim glow filtered through endless storms, but rays of light that pierced the atmosphere, striking the oceans directly. The seas glittered under this light, glowing not only silver, not only stormlit, but golden and blue. For the first time, the Earth shone beneath the sun, without the veil of storms hiding it completely. It was fleeting, but it was beautiful. When storms eased, the oceans calmed. Waves stilled, winds hushed, rain slowed to a drizzle. The seas stretched vast and quiet, their horizons soft and reflective. Steam no longer rose in torrents, but in gentle wisps. Lava islands cooled more slowly, undisturbed by downpours. Valleys filled steadily with water, not in floods, but in gentle flows. The oceans were learning not only to endure, but to rest. At night, too, there was quiet. Clouds parted to reveal stars, faint for the first time in ages. The moon had not yet been born, but the sky glittered with constellations unknown to future eyes. The seas reflected them, blue depths mirroring the stars above. Lightning still flashed at horizons, storms still rumbled in the distance, but overhead, calm. It was a night of balance, a night of reflection, a night of stillness in a world that had known only chaos. The storms did not vanish. They returned with fury, with torrents, with floods, but now they had rhythm, Fury was followed by rest, roar was followed by silence, chaos was followed by calm. The earth was learning to breathe. The oceans rose in a storm, then fell in silence. The skies raged, then hushed. The planet was no longer only chaos, it was rhythm. And rhythm is the beginning of balance. Even fire adapted to this rhythm. Volcanoes still erupted, lava still spread, but in the silences, their plumes rose higher into calm skies, drifting more slowly into space. Islands of cooled basalt endured longer, no longer washed instantly by storms. Fire remained fierce, but its role was no longer domination. It shared the world with water, with skies, with oceans at rest. The earth was no longer a battlefield, it was a partnership. Stillness may seem like nothing, but it is everything. In stillness, the oceans deepened. In calm, rivers lingered. In silence, the crust cooled more steadily. The quiet between storms was not emptiness, it was progress, it was patience, it was the space in which permanence grew. The earth was learning not only to rage, but to rest. The more often the storms eased, the more the oceans revealed their true color. Not only silver under lightning, but deep blue under sunlight. Not only restless shimmer, but calm reflection. From space, Earth was becoming unmistakable. A planet of oceans, vast and blue, cloaked in storms but softened by pauses. It was no longer only fire and cloud, it was water and sky. So the rain slowed, the winds hushed, the clouds parted. For hours, sometimes days, the earth rested. Its oceans grew still, its skies softened, its horizons calmed. The quiet between storms was fragile, fleeting, but it was real. And in that quiet, Earth revealed itself, a blue planet, shimmering, enduring, balanced. It was the promise of what the world would one day become. And so part Xi closes with Earth no longer bound only to chaos, but discovering rhythm, discovering calm, discovering the patience of stillness. The next chapter will bring a planet of fire and water, where oceans and volcanoes coexist, shaping the planet together in both fury and balance. The Earth was no longer only fire, it was no longer only a storm. Oceans had spread, seas had deepened, storms had softened into rhythm, water had found permanence. But the fire was not gone. Beneath the crust, the mantle still churned, volcanoes still roared, lava still flowed. The Earth was not only water, not only calm, not only blue, it was on fire too, always on fire. And together, fire and water shaped the world. Imagine standing at the edge of a young sea. Waves roll endlessly, rain falls in steady rhythms, winds circle above. Across the horizon, a volcano rises, glowing at its crown, spilling rivers of lava into the waters below. Where lava meets sea, steam rises in colossal columns, hissing upward into the skies. Waves hiss against molten rock, cooling it into black stone that grows the shoreline outward. The Earth was building land not only with fire, but with water. Everywhere the oceans spread, islands of fire emerged. Volcanic peaks thrust upward through the waves, glowing with eruptions, cloaked in ash, surrounded by steaming seas. Some vanished quickly, swallowed again by the water. Others endured, their lava flows hardening into basalt foundations that would one day grow into continents. These islands were fragile, fiery, fleeting, but they were the seeds of future land. Once fire had been the only destruction. It melted, shattered, scarred, but now, against water, fire became creation. Lava built land, eruptions raised islands, molten rivers formed new coasts. Water cooled what fire created, hardening molten flows into rock, solidifying islands into permanence. The seas shaped their edges, waves sculpting new stone into curves and cliffs. Together, fire and water built the first landscapes. At night, the oceans shimmered blue-black under lightning, their waves reflecting faint glimmers of storm. Across their horizons, volcanic peaks glowed red, their lava rivers bright against the dark. Steam rose constantly, glowing silver in stormlight, twisting into the heavens as columns that joined the clouds. The skies flashed with lightning, the seas hissed with waves, The volcanoes roared with eruptions. It was not silence, but it was balanced. Fire poured upward, water poured downward. Lava rose, rain fell. Volcanoes erupted, oceans cooled. Neither dominated, neither surrendered. Instead, they danced. Each answered the other, each shaped the other. The land was born in that dance, shorelines of stone where lava met waves, islands of basalt where eruptions rose from the seas, valleys carved by rain that filled with water again and again. The earth was alive with this dance, fire and water together. For the first time, land persisted. Not only molten plains, not only fragile islands, but cooled stone that endured against waves and storms. Basalt hardened into coasts, lava flows cooled into plateaus, islands remained, battered but unbroken. The earth was no longer only ocean and volcano. It was ocean and land, water and stone, permanence and creation. The oceans answered fire not only with cooling, but with persistence. Waves wore at new land, smoothing its edges, carving its coasts. Rain filled its valleys, rivers flowed across its surfaces. Water claimed what fire created, turning land into part of its endless cycle. Fire raised, water shaped. Fire erupted, water endured. Together, they gave Earth its body. From space, Earth revealed its new identity. Vast oceans shimmered blue, dotted with islands glowing red at their volcanic crowns. Steam rose in silver columns, clouds circled in endless storms, horizons blurred with both fire and water. It was no longer only a furnace. It was no longer only a storm. It was a planet of contrasts, of seas and volcanoes, waves and eruptions, blue and red, calm and chaos. It was becoming the planet we know. So the Earth turned, balanced between elements. Oceans spread, volcanoes erupted, storms circled, land grew. Fire and water together shaped its face, created its body, built its foundation. The Earth was no longer only one thing. There were many things. It was a contrast. It was balanced. It was a planet of fire and water. And so part XII closes with Earth revealed as a world of dual identity, seas spreading wide, volcanoes rising high, fire and water shaping the planet together in endless dance. The next chapter will bring the gift of atmosphere, when water and fire together shaped the skies into a more stable cloak, preparing Earth for its long blue future. The Earth had found its rhythm. Oceans spread wide, volcanoes roared, storms circled, and fire and water shaped the surface together. But their influence did not end at the ground. Their breath, their persistence, their endless exchange reached upward, reshaping the very skies. The Earth's atmosphere was no longer only a haze of steam and volcanic gas. It was becoming something deeper, thicker, stronger, a gift that would protect, endure, and define the planet forever. Every eruption sent new gases upward: carbon dioxide, nitrogen, sulfur, steam. Volcanoes did not only build land, they built skis. Their plumes spread across the heavens, feeding the cloak that wrapped the Earth. Eruption after eruption, century after century, the atmosphere thickened. What began as fragile vapor became a dense shroud, heavy enough to trap warmth, stable enough to endure storms, vast enough to cradle oceans. The Earth exhaled, and in that exhalation, it clothed itself. Water too fed the skis. Rains fell, seas steamed, waves released vapor into the air. Each cycle of storm thickened the atmosphere, filling it with moisture, feeding clouds, softening winds. The oceans gave as much as they received. They built the very blanket that sheltered them, one breath of vapor at a time. Together, fire and water were crafting the gift of skis. As the atmosphere grew denser, it became more than vapor. It became a shield. Meteors that once struck the surface more easily now burned in the skis, streaking as fire before vanishing. The oceans were spared from endless bombardments. The land was spared from smaller scars. The atmosphere had become a guardian, a veil that softened the violence of space. The Earth had found protection in its own breath. At night, the new atmosphere revealed its depth. Clouds no longer scattered easily, but gathered in heavy blankets across the skis. Lightning still flashed, Thunder still rolled, but the silence between them grew longer. The stars were dimmed, but the oceans glowed beneath stormlit clouds, calmer now, steadier. The air no longer churned only with violence. It circled, it layered, it balanced. The earth was breathing steadily for the first time. The thicker the atmosphere became, the more it held. Heat lingered longer, storms softened at their edges, rains fell more steadily. The oceans grew calmer, the climate less violent. The weight of the sky was heavy, but it was a gift. It pressed upon the seas, held them in balance, kept them from vanishing into space. Without the sky, the oceans would have fled. With it, they endured. Volcanoes gave more than land and heat. Their gases became part of the balance. Carbon dioxide keeps the world warm enough to resist freezing. Nitrogen thickened the skies into stability. Steam fed clouds that circled endlessly. Fire's gift was not only destruction, it was an atmosphere. The very chaos that once scarred the earth was the same chaos that now protected it. Water softened the fire, fire enriched the air, air held water. The partnership of elements built not only land and sea but sky as well. Each gave to the others, each shaped the others. The earth was no longer only the surface and ocean. It was an atmosphere too, a complete system woven from contrasts. From space, the earth looked different now. No longer only oceans and islands glowing red with fire, but cloaked in thick bands of cloud. White swirls circled endlessly, storms spiraled across blue seas, volcanic plumes rose and vanished into the haze. It was no longer naked beneath the stars. It was clothed in the atmosphere. A planet complete in its cloak. So the earth turned, its skies thickening, its storms balancing, its oceans sheltered. Volcanoes breathed, seas steamed, rains fell, clouds circled, and together they built the air that wrapped the planet in permanence. The earth had found its shield, its blanket, its gift. It was no longer only fire and water. It was fire, water, and sky. And so part XIII closes with earth transformed by its own breath, its atmosphere strong enough to shield, stable enough to cradle, soft enough to balance. The next chapter will bring the world of oceans, when Earth, cloaked in atmosphere and covered in seas, takes on its final Hadean form, the blue planet. The Earth had endured fire, it had survived storms, it had cooled enough to hold puddles, then pools, then seas. It had been scarred by comets, carved by rains, sculpted by rivers of patience. Its skies had thickened, its atmosphere had steadied, its storms had found rhythm. Now, at last, it had become what it was always meant to be. The Earth was a world of oceans. From horizon to horizon, water stretched unbroken. Plains that once glowed molten now lay drowned beneath waves. Valleys carved by rain had filled into lakes, lakes had merged into seas, seas had merged into oceans that spanned the globe. Standing anywhere upon its surface, one would see only water meeting sky, endless horizons of blue, restless but enduring, infinite in reach. The earth was no longer half fire, half storm, it was water. From space, the earth revealed its new face. No longer a furnace glowing red, no longer a storm world hidden in vapor, but a sphere cloaked in blue. Oceans gleamed across its surface, swirled with white clouds that circled endlessly. It was unmistakable now, the blue planet, the only one of its kind among the inner worlds, the only one wrapped in seas vast enough to define it. This was Earth's truest identity. The mantle still churned, volcanoes still roared, lava still flowed. Islands rose from the oceans, glowing at their crowns, steaming as they met waves. But water had become master. The seas cooled the lava, waves carved the stone, rain softened the land. Fire still shaped the world, but it no longer ruled it. The oceans ruled now. At night, the skies cleared more often, revealing stars. The oceans mirrored them, countless points of light shimmering on their surfaces, waves glinting with starlight. Lightning still split the heavens, storms still circled, but the seas endured calmly beneath them. The earth had found its reflection, not only of storms, but of stars, of sky, of cosmos. The oceans were mirrors of the universe itself. The seas were no longer fragile. They did not vanish in centuries or millennia. They stayed permanent, deep, steady. They filled the basins, carved the coasts, and shaped the atmosphere. The Earth was not only a planet with water, it was a planet of water. Its surface was ocean, its skies were cloudy, its color was blue. Water had claimed the world in patience, and patience had won. The planet was now a harmony of fire, water, and sky. Volcanoes roared, seas cooled, clouds circled. Fire gave land, water shaped it, air balanced it. The Earth was no longer chaos, it was balanced, a balance fragile but real. It was a planet alive, with contrasts, each element playing its part. This was Earth's new identity, a world covered in seas, cloaked in clouds, sculpted by rain, enriched by comets, balanced by atmosphere. It was not yet calm, not yet stable, not yet ready for life. But it was whole, it was enduring, it was permanent. It was a world of oceans. The oceans carried within them a promise. They were not only water, not only reflection, not only permanence. They had potential. They were the stage upon which the next chapter of Earth's story would unfold. One day in these oceans, chemistry would awaken. One day in these depths, life would stir. One day, this world of water would become a world alive. But even now, the promise was written into every wave. So the rains fell, the seas deepened, the skies balanced, and the planet transformed. No longer only fire, no longer only storm, no longer only struggle. It was water, it was blue, it was the ocean. The Earth had become itself, the blue planet, the world of oceans, the cradle of all that was yet to come. And so part XIV closes, completing the saga of water appears. From cooling breath to endless clouds, from first raindrops to rivers of steam, from shimmering pools to deep oceans, the story has carried us to Earth's identity as a world of water. The next major event of the Hadean Eon will bring fire again, the late heavy bombardment, when the skies once more filled with falling worlds, scarring the oceans but seeding them with the ingredients for life.